Hey everyone. So we've been exploring themes of power, politics, and glory in art history, and we've certainly seen several examples of how rulers have been glorified, um, and also the objects that convey statuses of their prestige and symbols of power. How about we take a look at a couple of ancient palaces that also convey power, not only through their enormous scale and impressive materials, but also something called a guardian creature. So let's pivot to that, because I think we all enjoy a few monsters now and again in our art history lessons. All right. The first stop on our exploration of palaces of the powerful from the ancient world is in a location once known as Assyria, in a part of the world we now associate with Iraq, Syria, those locations that were part of ancient region of Mesopotamia. The Assyrians were a powerful empire, particularly during the 8th century BCE. Their territory was huge, from the Tigris River to the Nile, from the Persian Gulf to Asia Minor. Their palaces were a mashup between a palatial, elegant palace and a fortress. And when you have those kind of two ideas coexisting, that's known as a citadel. So citadels are essentially walled compounds akin to a fortress. So in the case of attack, there would be ability to defend the palace and the ruler inside. You can see an illustration on the top left of what that beefy wall would be like surrounding the Assyrian palace. And in addition, you might encounter, as you approach the gate, or flanking up to the main palace area, a couple of these pairs of these monsters, right? They are known as lamassu, or man-headed wing bulls. And as you can see in the image on the bottom left, they were discovered when this site was excavated. They are associated with a famous ruler of the Assyrian Empire, Sargon II, and his citadel in present-day Iraq, but from the years from 720 to 705 BCE. They were sculpted in limestone and are large at some 14 feet in height. So not unlike we saw, if you might remember our study of the Great Pyramids of Egypt, there is the Great Sphinx, which serves as a guardian creature for one of the pharaoh's tombs. It's a hybrid between a man and a beast. In the Great Sphinx's case, a lion. So you often find the practice of using these kind of hybrid animals as guardian creatures, increasing their scale and making their parts, animals that are considered formidable. We're not talking about puppies and kittens, but we're talking in this case of the lamassu. And on the very bottom, you can see a side view, a hybrid of either a bull, sometimes a lion, and you can see this enormous soaring wing referencing a bird of prey. So also from the forward position, you can see that it has a face of a man with this very patternized beard, wearing a crown around which two pairs of bull's horns are depicted, another symbol of, power of that animal. They say the face represents Sargon himself, so the ruler's face, and bound to the body of this hybrid beast conveys a message of strength and power and being a formidable adversary for anybody who would challenge his rule. What's also interesting in terms of sculpture, it almost looks like from the front that these are freestanding sculptures, but they would be bound to large blocks of limestone, which you can see on the bottom view there in the profile view, and are essentially sculptural reliefs that are very raised. And whereas the animal appears to be standing at attention from the front, like a couple of guards, guarding the gateways to the citadel. From the side view, you can see that the animal is moving. It has more of a dynamic presentation. And even though the proportions of this make-believe animal, this guardian creature, seem naturalistic, you still see that there are a total of 5 legs, if you count the ones you see in the front and from the side view. But that is part of the ancient world philosophy, right? That, it's concept over naturalism. It's conveying a certain idea is more important than rendering something that is, true to nature and how animals are mostly born, at least mammals, with 4 legs. Included in this recipe of the ancient world is a strong use of pattern, not only in the beard of Sargon, but in the repetition of shapes of feathers, forming this beautiful, stylized, expansive, powerful wing of this beast. All right, so citadels, a concept that began with the Assyrians, a fortress-like palace that had additional sculptural elements, these guardian creatures of enormous scale that send a message that, think twice before you challenge the Assyrian Empire and its ruler Sargon. Moving on to Persia. And the Persian Empire was also a formidable, expansive empire of the ancient world. It was the largest empire by the year 480 BCE. It gobbled up what was known as the Assyrian Empire. They beat the Egyptians. They controlled the territory from the Indus River in South Asia to the Danube River in northeastern Europe. They were only defeated and toppled when Alexander the Great of Macedonia rose to power. What you find here on the left is a representation of Persepolis. It was essentially a huge citadel comprised of ceremonial and administrative structures, and the most important source of knowledge about the early Persians. It was heavily fortified. However, though torn down and razed by the conquering Alexander the Great, there's still enough there to tell us a lot about their history and understanding of Persian art. So you might notice in that view on the left, these enormous soaring columns. Some of them reach a height of 57 feet. There were a total of 36 of these columns, and what they did is they supported an enormous roof, if you pivot to the center image, of a huge ceremonial hall, so large that it held some 10,000 people. The columns, you can see in this artist rendering, supported the roof, but specifically, the column capitals differed quite a bit from what we saw from ancient Greece or even ancient Egypt. For the tops of them depicted different kinds of animals, and sometimes these hybrid beasts, functioning like guardian creatures, like the lamassu for the Assyrian citadels. So, they're known as protumes. And you can see that word down here. On the right, we see some close-ups of these protumes, or guardian creature column capitals from the Persian Empire. Sometimes you see bulls, like you see on the bottom, lions. You may even see griffins, which are a hybrid of a lion with a bird of prey face. So again, this idea of having these fierce, strong, sometimes predatory animals convey the power and strength of an empire to make all of those tribute nations who would bring gifts to the Persian king as part of the huge empire, paying homage and respect, would take a look at these guardian creatures, right, and understand the power of this empire and think twice, of course, about challenging it.